Over to you, Paresh, sir, your life.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with. In Conversation with is a management series by CASI Global New York, where we invite senior professionals from across the world, from across industries, in search of executable advice. My name is Paresh, and I'm a member of the board of directors at CASI Global New York. We are the world's largest platform for sustainability with a presence across 52 countries. We also run a very large volunteering platform with a reach of over 3 million volunteers. So today's session promises to be very exciting. We have three very senior professionals from the CSR background. We have Sohini ji from Breakthrough India. We have Vikas ji from ArcelorMittal. And we have Avilash ji from Tata Projects. Now, before we go on to the first presentation of the day, I have a question. Please give me a short answer. Anybody can take it. Anybody can answer this. So the question is, most companies, and this question is pertaining to today's guests, especially Avilash ji and Vikas ji, but anybody can give me an answer. See, we Indians were always having a giving philosophy. So most companies used to say, okay, we are having a mining project here, so let's distribute water filters to the villagers. Let's do something for the girls in this village. Let's do something for the police on the highway. So we always had a giving nature, and large companies like Arcelor or Tata's or Birla's or Godrej used to donate anyway. Yeah. So it is not new that a CSR thing, forces such large companies to donate. You were donating anyway. But on the other hand, has the CSR rule made your donations smaller? Because now you need to go within the framework of the law. So then it has to pass through a funnel. Pehle there was no funnel. So I speak from experience because I know a few companies in Gujarat. So they used to do a lot of philanthropy. Let's do this for the villagers. Let's do this for the SC community. Let's do this for the tribal community. And the factory manager will do something. The head of vigilance will do something. The general manager will do something. And everybody used to do something on behalf of the company. But now there is a funnel. So it has to pass through the funnel. And there are so many restrictions. So on one side, companies who are not doing anything, उनकी बात नहीं कर रहे हैं. But we are talking about companies who are doing a lot from every angle. So has the CSR rule restricted some of your givings in terms of it doesn't fit within the framework of the law or the strategy of the CSR? What is your opinion?
Because sir, shall I take?
Please.
Yeah, the things has changed. In a short, the approach has changed. The strategy has changed. It has changed in terms of convergence and partnership. The projects, partnerships and convergence is the approach that has been adopted by the companies. Earlier, it was a one way of giving and doing things, but now more and more collaboration and pool of resources are happening. So convergence is one of the approach. I would not say it has shrink the donation part, but yeah, in some extent it has. But giving part has become more strategic in terms of forming collaboration, partnership, resource pooling, and a different approach in terms of longer and sustainable way of doing things. Now the one kind of event or one donation happens, things goes. But now industries are forming a longer 2 to 3 years, 5 years, taking projects and bringing some impact and making it sustainable. So this is what I want to say.
Done. On the other side, Sohini ji, Vikas ji spoke about sustainable projects. When we had no law restricting CSR, we could go. The CSR managers or the NGOs could go to the people they like, people they know, and ask for donations. And we used to get a lot of donations to do a lot of good. Now suddenly after the law, it had become hardcore strategy like business strategy. So in your instance, let's say you're working in gender, if gender doesn't factor in the top three strategic initiatives of a larger company, you lose your donations, and they were your donors for a long time. So how does it work? Because does gender really come in the top three? Because I'm sure it will not be number one. Number one has to be skilling, or number one has to be village displacements and replacements. Because most large companies are into infrastructure, highways, mining, steel. Those are the people with the large pockets. So the number one priority will be always people displacement, water, because they need to make the villagers happy where they are working. Yeah, so that's the number one priority. The second priority may be skilling or education, because that is the central government's priority. I'm not saying it is wrong or right. That is not my job. I'm saying gender, if it doesn't come on the number three, then suddenly the gender focus is lost. Does it happen? Does it not happen? Or is it just me?
Happens.
Please tell me your opinion.
It happens. In fact, 2% of only 2% of CSR money actually goes towards gender, which is such a sad thing, because if you look at it, the moment you say gender, people assume a lot of things. But if you are going to support whatever, you support skilling, you're supporting education, you're supporting village development, you're supporting maybe disaster management, women are half of your stakeholders, because you're supposed to have a 50-50 country in a 50-50 world. So if you are not prioritizing women in that place, if you're not looking at girls' education first, if you're not looking at within the disaster management, you're not looking at women's needs first, if you're not looking at skilling women, then you will see what is happening in our country today. There's a huge number of women falling off of the labor force participation. After COVID, it has gone down to 19.2, I think, 19.2%. While as McKinsey says that if you get 63% of women in our country working, that will add, I don't even know how many zeros that will add to the GDP. If we are to go by that, then actually prioritizing gender and prioritizing women in all of those programs, doesn't matter whether you're working in livelihood or you're working in education, becomes very important. So, we work in the cross-cutting of education and gender equality, because we believe that girls can get enrolled into school, but they stay in school because the school environment is conducive to them. And there is a gender focus in the curriculum that they're getting. So if we continue with that, then we can make all those environmentals friendly for women to stay and to work. And so happy to kind of elaborate on this a little bit
So
more.
you're saying gender as a gender is not getting enough focus as it should.
Focus, it can be a cross-cutting thing.
Okay. Now one more question before we start with the presentations for the day. Anjani ji, you have a PhD in CSR. You are a director at DY Patil. My question to you is, how do you sensitize boards on the gender, on the gender issue? How should one go about it?
Definitely, the first step is that spreading the CSR awareness and the CSR education among the generation, among the young generation, among the students. And I have seen that, I have witnessed that in Maharashtra, that some schools are adopting that CSR education awareness under the CSR diary. So first step is that generation should be sensitized. Young generations should be sensitized, and they should be made as a responsible citizen. First step is that. Second is that whenever the development plan and projects, the central government or the state governments, they are announcing that, and the corporations, they are taking the participation in that projects, they should make that, as the ma'am has said recently, that the gender issue, it means that the girl child and the women, those who are disempowered, they should take the first place in the importance. They should take the first, like the employment. First of all, they should be taken for the health concerns for their. So development plans and the strategy should be like that way, and awareness levels should be high for the sensitization. That should be integrated with the development plan and project in the very beginning way. Then it will go, sensitization process will be go initially in the initial level.
Correct. I'll tell you something that we did on the gender. When I was asked by Maharashtra Police to recruit around 20 people for their cyber wing. So IPS Atul Kulkarni was heading the cyber.
Yeah.
For Master Police then. And so I went to Jalgaon. I recruited 20 girl engineers as trainees for Cyber Police Maharashtra.
Beautiful, sir.
So that is something we did in gender, but we had to go all out of our way and rearrange everything because getting girls and permissions from their parents is a very difficult thing to do. So
Yes.
we had to get involved in talking to parents, and then I had to speak to 20 girls ka parents, saying कि police का job है, please let them
Correct.
come for 6 months
Correct.
and do that. Yeah, but you're right. You're right. We
Yes,
need to
that's
sensitize.
correct.
Again, one last question before we go into the presentation. I have Kanan Saab here, and I cannot miss the opportunity to ask Kanan sir a question. Kanan sir, you have been the head of strategy at Hinduja Group, over 90 companies. You are a part of Bombay Chamber of Commerce. You are in so many chambers. What do you think should be done to sensitize boards on the gender issue?
Thank you, Mr. Sheth. As you are aware, now two things are happening. One is statutory by itself, institutions like SEBI and government saying that they should have minimum so many people on the board or so many people should be there. And even if you look at sectors like IT, banking, financial services today, if you see the number of people who are entering the service in these sectors, more than 50% are women. And apart from that, what we are discussing, you are talking about statutory CSR. Even before government SEBI said that we have to do CSR, the large organizations like Tata's and Birla's and maybe ArcelorMittal's, whenever they went and set up plants in places which are far away from cities, first thing they do is they used to develop a temple, they used to develop a hospital, they used to develop a primary health center, they used to create a school. So all that was being done. Yeah. So it was always being done. And in terms of gender, when you come to you talked about where it should be in top 3. If you look at the CSR also, again, we are still far behind in education, health, as well as the poverty reduction. And one more thing which was added to that is now water. So these are 4 areas which attracts the attention of corporates because they are the real need of the hour. But as it was all being discussed, even in this forum, you raised this issue, and everybody is conscious about that. They are aware, and I'm sure all of them are doing something about gender inclusion and whatever initiatives they are taking. So there is a clear movement now towards including this gender aspects in whatever we are doing. We are also happy to hear that Chief Justice of India saying that so much percentage of judges should be from uh, women category, and we are going to have the first Chief Justice will be a woman, but she'll be there for only 1 month. Maybe government should look at extending this being the first time for 1 more year. And it is happening in defense now. Defense people are not, earlier they are not giving a permanent service to them. Now I think recently, also I think 2 weeks back, something was being decided. Now they are, so it is happening in every sector. And as I said, already it has happened in service sectors like banking, financial services, and services. I'm sure this will happen. You have done like the case of police and manufacturing. Of course, Dr. Sudha Murthy was the first one to go to telco plant. So like that it is happening, and we have leaders like Dr. Sohini who is spearheading this activity. So now we find again CSR, lot of women getting involved. That itself is a good sign. I'm sure we will have gender equality going forward. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for that. Can we start with the presentations for the day? Avilash ji, can we have a presentation, please?
Yeah.
And your opinion, of course.
Yes. Dr. Mitesh, will you be presenting or I can pick it up?
Yeah, I have given you the rights. You will be able to share your screen now.
Okay. Is it visible to all?
Yeah, it's still loading, but yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
I think there's
We can
some
hear you,
amount
but
of-
the screen is not visible.
yes, there's some time lag between what I'm projecting and not reaching up to you. So
No
kindly
worries.
bear.
No worries. Give me 1 second.
Yes. Are you people able to see now?
Able to see the screen.
Yes, sir. We are able to see it now. Avilashi, are you there?
Still able
Yeah.
to see. Yes. Okay. So first of all, thanks to CASI for giving this opportunity. Very quickly, the canvas which I'm going to put across is a kind of a journey so far in trying to look back to look ahead, understanding the social sector. So in this, I have tried to look at 4 phases, how my learning has been, curve has moved. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes. So a bit, put it into 4 parts. First, steps into the social sector, how things happen, deep dive at ground level. Then comes a phase where you look at evolving norms, mandate, the race for alignment. Well, since I come from both the social sector as well as the corporate sector, I'll try to put both these lenses together and eventually trying to understand how whether the movement of the bottom of the pyramid has been happening and how it has been. Next slide. The, the first steps into the social sector was fundamentally to understand the context. Started off moving things in Rajasthan, the tribal blocks of southern Rajasthan as I speak, and the first 5 years were spent trying to understand. And if I draw what mostly I could understand, the 3 critical things which I observed in this period of time. Can you move to the next slide? Communities on one side, the donors on the other side, and the critical challenge which was there was migration. If I talk from a social sector point of view, the civil society point of view, the clear things which one could correlate to, or I could correlate to at that point of time was this, that uh, government resources were through the social sector was something which was being looked through a lens not easy to come by. International development aid was there, though it was had started to move on and decline, but still there, and there were good amount of organizations at the from grassroots level were trying to bring about changes in the society through creating change makers on the ground. Trust me, today identifying a change maker is much easier than what it used to be 2 decades or 4 decades. So at that point of time, what we looked at, there was a question which was asked that have we restricted ourselves? My personal view, absolutely restricted. Absolutely restricted. The understanding is different at different levels. I have a slide at the end to say why I said this, to mean what I said this, why I said this, but it was there. And the good things about this period was that not much of the word interference. There were people who understood things can't happen on a quarter to quarter basis. Some things required 3 to 5 years, 10 years down the line. Dr. Rajendra Prasad created, Rajendra Singh created that change, the Maxis Award winner, because he could map it over a period of 10 years to show you through satellite imagery of the geography what it was when before he started and what it is after he did it. So that amount of patience was there in those days, not those instant coffee days that time. Can we next slide, please? Then 2005-10 deep dive. I hear people talking about how did we integrate things and how to do things. Gender to me is a cross-cutting thing. You can't think of education, you can't think of skilling, you can't think of livelihood, you can't think of health without women, of course. Farmers training, we have done rampantly involving farmers, male. But over a period of time, I realized that if you go and see in the fields, in the paddy sowing time, you only see women bending themselves for hours and trying to do that job. So here I realized that is there a point to teach the male farmer or we need to engage with women? So that sensitization started happening when you looked at, it's not about innovation, even if you keep your basics right. For me, I would say innovation, innovative ideas is more of a fancy word. If you do your basics right, through my deep dive, I've realized half the battle is won. Next slide, please. This is the time when this era of mandates and alignment started happening. And this was the time also when I moved to the corporate sector in a big way. I joined Tata's in 2012. So it was a bit of a transition. Earlier you had the UN Global Compact. GRI came in 1997. I'm saying, how did India emerge through these mandates? And how did I see it? Was that these global compact coming, CEO signing of the communication on progress, GRI, every annual report based on GRI 1, 2, 3, 4, and how many versions will come, even integrated reporting has now come. So, I mean, you're more looking at numbers, reporting, how have you done. While that was necessary to make sure that there's transparency, but on this, I found companies, basically the listed ones, getting off the blocks proactively or reactively. We can debate it, but things started happening. The national voluntary guidelines coming, and then obviously the CSR rule coming, that 2%. 20,000 crore compared to what government spent, which is 10,000 lakh crores, is nothing. You put all the 2% into one kitty and you put how much government invests, we are nowhere there. 20,000 crore, 10 lakh, big money. But somewhere you want to see some things happening and you want to see how we contribute. But these frameworks also asking the right kind of questions, and even to the civil society, because that sector also requires a lot of transparency and accountability. Anyway, these started happening, and reporting, pitching for national, international fame in frameworks, award applications became a new journey altogether. While the work continued to be what I had seen in 2000 to 2005 or 2005 to 2010. Next slide. Lastly, I would, can we have one after another. It is a bit animated. Yes, this is what a bird's nest. Next one, please. Dr. Mitesh, one after that. Natural engineers, if we see birds. Third, this is a construction sector. The new India, the new world infrastructure. And then you see this photograph. Just let me explain. This photograph is a photograph of people living in their houses and flamingos flying past them. Did we come into their areas or they came into our areas? Again, the debate is the development, bottom of the pyramid, people coming first. Where do the natural engineers go? So when the bottom of the pyramid, I also looked at the entire ecosystem, not just women, men, or anybody for that. And lastly, if I sum it up to the next slide. Now, companies sitting heavily on the ground, they have their ways of doing things. Companies sitting lightly on the ground have their ways of doing things. Similarly, for social sector, they bring in their competency, partnership, collaboration. My friend Dr. Vikas, when we talked about it, I completely echo his sentiment. Good things have also happened, but the way of looking at it has been through a different lens, and we need to be mindful of the fact that these are certain factors which play in when you look at development. There are expectations from the stakeholders. What's in it for me is a question. Next slide. And then if I see, we all try to define CSR and sustainability in our own way. And the left brain works more than the right brain. We're looking at numbers. Where are we today? Have we moved up the needle? Are we looking at our program performance, organizational, social performance, or are we looking at the bottom of the pyramid persons moving up the ladder? That's where our interpretations come into play, and that's where I said that everybody is looking at it. Nobody is wrong. See, it's a very subjective element, but this still remains a reality. We have debates, we have thought-provoking points asked and then people answering. One question which was that, is it restrictive, is it not restrictive? Different people have a different view. But what about the bottom of the pyramid? Next slide, sir. There is hope. When wherever you see diversity, not just in gender, including the marginalized, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, the Dalits and the Adivasis, women, children for that matter. And you remember that there's only one earth. And we see elements that yes, things are shaping up, things are improving. Compliances, regulatory regime is making it a bit complicated. It's my view, but there is the civil society and the corporate. Is there a gap? Is there a divide? Can we bridge that gap? Can government as well chip in? There are success stories also happening. So there is hope, there is positivity. India may claim that we are the first to come with its kind of a regulation and other things. It's debatable whether we have done this without that or we won't have done this without that. So I won't get into that debate, but what I see at the end that there is ample amount of opportunity to join hands, collaborate, and there is hope. The smiling faces says it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vikas ji, for that presentation. A lot of things I completely agree upon. That given the fact that we are sitting on 20,000 crores and compared to a government spend, 20,000 crores is less than the budget of one single state of one single department. Yeah, so any department in the state of Maharashtra has a budget of more than 20,000 crores, right, for 1 year. Yeah, so I completely agree to that. But you are right. People have made a difference. There are a lot of foundations and large companies working to make a difference. And yes, the future is bright. There now people have, I think, smartened up and reworking their strategies to create a sustainable impact on a society. So instead of just distributing Parle-G biscuits, now we are trying to create a sustainable impact. Otherwise, it was about distributing, and a Parle-G is just a figure of speech. Water filters and uniforms and shoes and whatever you talk about. So really, Pele, it was about distribution. Now that the CSR heads are putting their minds together and working on leaving a sustainable impact, so that when they leave a society and go to another village, so that village should not go down to the earlier level. It should remain to the uplifted level. Is something that large CSR heads are working on.
So you said one thing at the beginning, and I'll quote: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." If we have, आपने कहा था ना, we sorry, culturally India had the way, used to have the way of doing things, giving back to society, either through for religious purpose, for various purposes. So that's the culture. Not only India, but many countries have had, and so strategy. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. We can have strategy, you can revisit strategy, come back, but at the end of the day, if we keep our basics right, we mean at the end of the day, I'll tell you why. I visit villages and everything. Sometimes I find some organizations are very much intensive on the communication, branding, visibility. Be it the corporates or be it the civil society NGOs implementing organizations. Anyway, for that. Okay. We are very humble about it, and in Tata projects, we just don't want that, and even a single penny should go towards any kind of a banner or anything for that. But when we go and we interact with children, then we say that, okay, we come from an organization which is working with you, and we from the Tatas. Hope you have heard them. Trust me, in the remotest locations, also the children stand up and smile and say yes. So that's the pride which I take from that organization. It will build, it will happen. People will see the work. But that's where I said culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. And yes, I completely agree with you, because that was my question on, at the start of the seminar. That was the comment that Indians, we believe in philanthropy. So it is not about philanthropy. आप किसी के भी घर चले जाओ तो खाने का plate लग जाएगा. So it is like that, So we are there. So let's move on to Vikas ji. Vikas ji, your thoughts, sir, quickly, if you could tell us what do you think about CSR sustainability, something that we could learn from you. Vikas ji, please.
Yeah, thank you. As Avilas sir has already very well presented about how the evaluation of the journey in the last 10 to 15, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. From now we are moving from, we need to rethink from the philanthropy, CSR, then ESG, these concepts. So 10 years ago, issues for CSR such as measuring carbon footprint, socially responsible companies, ethical supply chain might have not been in place, but now it has come in picture, because that time business objectives were different. Now things are getting different. So we are in an era where we now the ESG was not taken on priority. It was not in a boardroom, right? So now it is coming from top to down. So that change we see, that commitments are coming from top to down. When we talk about ESG, as we all know, environment, social, and governance. So the model is changing, and it's still, we are in an evolving phase. So I will just pitch on as I said, a very quick presentation. which will focus more on the strategic part. So I will just put a hope it might have come on screen. I will just make it a full screen. Yeah. So now will just focus on the strategic approach to CSR. We all know. So what is CSR? Basically, as you know, a company as Vilas sir also elaborated, company is there for a business, for a profit, but overall it has to run among in the society and the community in and around, where it has to also make positively impact the society and the various stakeholders. So these are all so what we understand, right? So in a developed countries, already, they are on governance. They talk about, when we talk about, they talk about complete ESG model. But in a developing country, still we are in a, we either focus on national building, socio-economic development, rural development. But when we look to the developed country, they are more into governance, business ethics, human rights, and environment. So what CSR is and isn't, as the various the law has come in place, the CSR law. There are various concepts. There are various guidelines which are there. So still there liberal views are being taken. That after the law and slowly Ministry of Corporate Affairs through their various notifications, frequent asked question, things are getting, what qualifies for CSR, what isn't. So there are various concepts. There are ISO 2016, NGR, BC national guidelines, stakeholder ethics, SDG goals, the Company Act. So we know there is no common universal definition CSR. Even still we follow, the Business Council for Sustainable Development definitions. So in CSR, when we talk about India, as we already have discussed last, that it started, and any CSR, the industries who are there in, when we talk about the industries, when there was no law or no CSR, even though there was, because of the founding fathers, their ethical beliefs for giving back to society was there. So it was being practices. So so it has evolved over the years. And company, there are three kind of companies who does CSR. We have a big international multinational corporation who has the clear CSR responsibility department mechanism in place. There are national companies who have who has the CSR but not have a proper structure to it. And there are many small and medium-sized enterprises which they also do work, but on a very piecemeal basis. So whether our CSR should be a strategy. So when we talk about the strategy, that means there has to be a clear-cut policy principle in place, and that should be so it should be a board level commitment to it, and it is very much required to reach that outcome. So CSR strategy is no different like for other strategy that we evolve, for marketing and other purposes. So what CSR strategy involves, you need to be very clearly define this CSR planning processes and explain how it is created and will be executed over the time frame. And it involves, planning a strategy. It involves, we need to set our priorities, business and the community priorities and the various stakeholders, and where we want to go. One of the strategies are that you focus on one area and you work upon it, or you can take up a multiple thematic areas to work upon. Simultaneous choices highlight the need to pull the entire organization together around us, because you need to have a internal as well, internal stakeholders to support you to reach that, to support your strategy which has you put on the board. And there definitely resources would be required to achieve that. So we need to have assessment baseline, and these are some of the processes roadmap. We need to be very clear where we are and what we want to do and how we want to do it. So these are some of the components for strategic planning. You need to have a proper mission, vision, goal, objective, initiatives, and their targets and indicators to measure it. And also it is very important to have the exit strategy, because you are there for a certain time periods, and you need to exit and sustain that project. So it should be planned initial of the project that what would be your exit strategy of each and every initiatives that that is planned. So strategic in general, we have community investments. These are some of the areas which are involved, and it requires, as I said, a senior management commitment, internal, external, and channels of implementing CSR. Either you collaborate with the government, with the community-based organizations, associations. So collaboration do help in making the project sustainable, pooling the resources, because individually, directly, lot of you can make a limited impact, but to make it in a large scale, you need to have that collaboration. So I conclude by saying that the integration of CSR is possible when companies has a strong that philosophical belief in their social purpose. There is a mandate also, but unless until the company that culture is not there, that intent, it remains on numbers and figures and that, so that cultural change in the organizations for doing good, for taking care of one of the critical stakeholders is very much required. So we need to evaluate the project. So branding and communicating your CSR. So I take a, it is a different ball game. In a corporate, we need to have their branding and communication plan also in place. So this should be very inclusive, and it should be very well executed. So taking forward, we should be always be updated, aware of being a professional, and I also see a responsibility to it by making organizations the social functions and the intent and the contribution they want to reach. So the CSR practitioners or the professionals in the organizations should be well aware of the global best practices and compliances, and partnerships, which I said is a critical to take it forward. So integrate in the day-to-day business and effectively communication and is also very much required. So there is a space, a lot of still it is a evolving phase. Now things are moving from CSR to ESG, and still social is one of the important critical area, and the companies now thinks that it has become so more strategic, and board driven and leadership commitments are there. So it is very much required to aligned with the business objectives. So by this, I conclude my deliberation and look forward. If any question and answers are there, I am happy to respond here.
Thank you, Vikasji, for your thoughts. I completely agree with your presentation. One comment here before we move on to Sohini ji. You mentioned about ESG. Our next project at CASI is we are setting up the world's first international ESG exchange. So we are setting up a platform where any company from around the world can list their non-financial reports. Today it is restricted. I don't like restrictions. See, I'm a capitalist by nature, and we are doing a phenomenally good job in the business of CSR. Yeah, so and volunteering, of course, we are the world's largest. So I think capitalism is required somewhere, and we are setting up an ESG exchange because most ESG exchanges, and there are 5 in the world, the 6th being set up by the Indian government now, it's in plan. And they are all restricting businesses. Only listed companies can list their ESG reports, and only listed companies listed within that stock exchange can list their ESG reports. And it has to be ESG. I frankly do not care. It can be E or S or G. Why does it have to be ESG? There is no rule, we are setting up the first international ESG exchange where we will allow any company from around the world, even unlisted companies, to list their ESG reports. And we'll also be allowing companies to list only E or S or only G reports. Yeah, so if there is a mining company or an oil and gas company who is not comfortable discussing E, they can leave that out of it. Tell us what you are doing in S and the G, and we are happy to learn. Because many companies are not good in that also. So we are setting up that platform, and I invite all of you to be a part of that platform. We will be declaring that open within a month from now. So that's what I wanted to discuss with you when you mentioned the word ESG, because this is something we have been planning for the last 18 months now, and we'll be declaring the gates open within a month. So I will reach out to you also, sir, for your non-financial reports. Yeah, and yes, you are right. There are countries talking about basics of CSR, and then there are countries and companies in Europe talking about ethical pricing, for instance, which is a topic which we have not really touched upon in India. So ethics at the board level, ethics at across the company, and even ethical pricing is a very big issue in activism. Activist in Europe. Yeah, so those are some things which we wish to promote at the ESG exchange. Because only if the knowledge percolates across the world, then people can start doing something. People are good in general, but you need to tell them, you need to reach out to them saying, okay, ethical pricing bhi hota hai. And then people will start working on it. So you'll suddenly have 500 companies in India working on ethical pricing at a board level. But somebody needs to do that information dissemination, and that is what we are good at. So we take it upon ourselves. Okay, this is an information we like, and this is what we want to disseminate to 1,000 boards in India, and then we go around and disseminate that information. And somewhere in that we make a business case because the company has to run. So that is our next big thing, an ESG exchange. So moving on to Sohini ji. Sohini ji, we are very keen to have your presentation and your thoughts on diversity, please.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You'll share.
Yeah, please. Someone has a question?
Yeah.
No? Yeah, Sohini ji, boliye na, please boliye.
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Yeah, please.
So thank you very much. I'm really honored to speak in a virtual room full of a lot of CSR specialists, because I come from the other side of the table. So I come with the begging bowl to all of you actually. But I understand that somewhere we are equal partners in this whole thing, and so some of it and so I just wanted to share some of the matters that concerns a lot of us. when we talk about gender and when you talk about gender norms, it's deeply actually embedded in cultures. And unfortunately, in many cultures across the world, women are still seen as second class citizens, and women and girls are not probably valued as much as they should be valued for being who they are. And we still, we still talk about son preferences. We still talk about, my son will do this. We do not talk about my daughter is going to do this. And there are more expectations on the son. And I'm completely aware of the fact that those expectations are very difficult sometimes for boys also, and not just girls. So with that caveat, um, we're talking about ESG, we are talking about women in leadership roles. One of the things about ESG is how much diversity you have, and how women can come into, the boards and leadership roles in organizations. But how are we going to do this? Because this is what happened. The first cutback post COVID that happened in many rural households across India, poor rural households, was that the girls' education got cut. And even if the family had one phone, the phone was prioritized for the boys' education and not for the girls' education. And in rural areas, when poor families and disadvantaged families have girls sitting at home, what does happen? That girls get married very early. It's the reality. 1 in 4 girls in India still get married before the age of 18. There's been a huge amount of efforts, both by civil society organizations and by the government, to cut the numbers back. It used to be 46% just 7-8 years ago. It's come down to 23%, but a lot of us fear that we have regressed because of COVID-19 on some of those pre-COVID numbers. We still don't know what is going to be the real number in our country. Why does that happen? If you look at some of the statistics, it's quite evident that we have a skewed sex ratio, more boys in our country than girls. We have a number of girls dropping out of school. Girls get enrolled at the primary level, but when it comes to secondary and higher secondary level, girls drop out at an alarming rate. 29% of girls drop out by the age of 14 because, schools are either too far away, parents do not allow them to go by themselves, schools do not have toilets, so when you have menstruation, you do not, have a safe place to use, or just that parents are scared that letting a girl travel 5 kilometers to school might give her some harm. These are some of the statistics. The National Family Health Service supports the fact of many of these, and these are realities and everyday realities that we face in our work. So in that thing, the organization that I represent, Breakthrough, has been working for 21 years to make violence against women and girls unacceptable. And what do? We build leadership of young people to have a voice, to stand up against violence, and to have choices in their own lives. So we work with currently about 573 adolescents across 4 states. Where do we work? We work in UP, we work in Jharkhand, we work in Bihar, we work in Delhi and in Haryana. And we've just started working in Punjab, and I'll tell you how it is. So the work, actually, what we want to do is for young people between the age of 11 to 18, build a gender equitable view for them to understand, what is discrimination and violence, where can they raise their voices, where can they have dialogues with not just with their parents, but also with their peer groups, to make sure that people understand that they also have a choice. And where can they actually use the school system to create a much more enabling environment that helps them stay back in school. Because remember, teachers come with the same kind of mindsets that the community comes. So, I have seen that boys are given the heavy tasks, girls are made to ask to make tea whenever visitors come to the school. STEM education is prioritized for boys and not for girls, while we know that our girls have been doing much better in schools, in secondary school, than boys. And other kinds of discrimination happens as well, which I don't want to really go into, but there are threats of violence even within the school system. So we work with a gender equity curriculum called Taro Ki Toli, which talks about gender equality, and it's an interactive curriculum which has 45 sessions over 2 years, built into the school curriculum, built into the school hour, where our facilitators go and work with the school. So we've worked with this now for 6 years. We've got excellent results. We have scaled this up in many states, but the thought was that this is not scale. This is just, how can we go from school to school to school? And we've got CSR support for doing this as well in Haryana and in many other places. But how can we actually scale it up until and unless we work with the government? So we approached several governments. We are talking to the Haryana government, we're talking to Orissa government, we're talking to, and while we have just got permission to actually apply a gender lens in the school curriculum and work with about 23,000 teachers over the next 2 years is in Punjab. So what we are saying is that build a curriculum that doesn't talk about Papa goes out to work and Mama stays at home, which has a gender equitable view in the curriculum itself. Sensitize teachers who could actually deliver the curriculum and deliver their whatever they're teaching in a more gender sensitized way. So that, and build systems within the school, like a child protection system, like safe spaces within the school. Work with the school leaders, the BEOs, DEOs, and the master trainers, work with them to make sure that they also have a gender equitable view. We'd like to reach 3 million adolescents by 2025 across at least 3 to 4 states, some of the states that I mentioned to you, and build really the ambition of girls. In many places, when you ask girls, what do you want to be? We still get the answer, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be an Anganwadi worker. I'm talking about rural, poor girls. Where is the ambition to be so many role models? So girls often would not say they would want to, play a sport or fly an airplane, which boys would very, automatically say, I want to be a cricket player, I want to join the army, I want to fly a plane. Girls will not come up with those kind of answers. So build aspiration in girls, which is very, very important through the gender equity curriculum, and actually bring in the parents into the school, because it all starts from home. Parents do not, parents have the same gender norms. So bring the parents into the school to make sure that parents value the school education as much as the school values the education, and so that girls actually stay in school for more than, for more years, they complete education, and then they get a choice of picking up a career. Most education for girls in our country, and I'm again talking about rural, poor, disadvantaged girls, are tied to marriage. So jada pad lenge because you will get a good husband. That's how it works. Can we actually not talk about that and say that jada pad lenge because you want to have a career, you want to actually contribute back to the society that you have. So one of the ways is through the schools, and we are very, very hopeful that we will have more government partnerships in this area. The second thing is working with men and boys. We believe that if you are trying to change gender equality in this country, leaving men and boys out of it will be absolutely foolhardy, because men and boys are as much part of that entire gender norms. Because if you look at a boy, from the young age, parents think that he's going to be the earning member, he will have to take the burden of the family, he will be the person to look after the family, and that is why the boy is prioritized so much. So, constructs of masculinity actually work as much for the boy and for the girl, which is why we work very closely with boys. We make them understand that girls are equal, that you can have a friendship with a girl, you do not, so we actually encourage intergender conversations as well as intergenerational conversations, and we've seen fantastic things that boys have done in our work areas. Boys have shared housework. Boys are learning how to make reusable cloth sanitary napkins because they feel that their families need that. During the lockdown, we've heard so many stories of boys helping their mothers and their sisters to make sanitary napkins at home so that they do not have to go out and buy them from the market. So working with men and boys is absolutely imperative. We also work on building the leadership of 19 plus youth, because in the village, if you talk about role models, there are very few role models. And if you talk to them about a role model from Bombay or Delhi or somewhere else, they do not connect that. So we want to create the role models locally, so that girls have the aspirations of being like the Jholawala Didi in that next house, be like a Sushila in the next house who has gone and, has set up her own business of beekeeping. So we want to focus on the 19 to 24-year-olds to build up their leadership. And last but not the least, our popular culture. Our popular culture is constantly focusing on this huge masculine men, and not enough on women. We see, so how many films do you see where women are the central character, where women are really coming out in that? We would love to kind of work with mainstream media. We've done a little bit of work, but it's very difficult to work with Bollywood, but we have very sensitive actors there as well who can be role models who encourage this. So we'd love to work on mainstream media to change the narrative about girls' empowerment and girls' equality. What is it that we can ask from CSR programs? CSR programs can support schools to be gender equitable places. This is very, very important. You do not have to support gender, you have to support actually education. You have to support curriculums that help children develop gender equitable views. They are very, very important, because if you still are reading textbooks where women are not shown up in leadership roles, then you will never be able to actually cross that barrier. And that schools and communities can collaborate to create safe spaces for girls. Make sure that sexual harassment doesn't happen in the area where you stay. Make sure that domestic violence do not happen in the family that you have girls in. So these are what CSR programs can support. But just one more slide to say that these are some of the most important things that are emerging post-COVID. Mental health. Children across India has suffered a lot during the COVID-19. But a recent study of UNICEF shows that out of 21 countries, India is the country with the lowest amount of adolescents who have said that they would seek support for mental health. Again, because mental health is so stigmatized that people do not want to seek help. Can we build mental health processes into the school curriculum? Back to school campaigns. Apparently 10 million girls are out of school because of COVID-19. This is an emergency. Can we all work together to make sure that we talk, whatever program we are doing, can we talk to the community to send their children back to school? Can they monitor that girls are attending school? Prioritize girls' safety and protection. There has been a rise in gender-based violence, in domestic violence. I've heard of stories of girls getting beaten up by their brothers or by somebody else, because people are also frustrated, loss of jobs and loss of people dying and all of that thing. The economic impact. Can we make school fees and are not applicable in government schools, but can we make private schools, school fees, can we reduce that for girls? Can we cancel examination fees for girls so that more girls are back into education? And the distance learning strategies. We've seen the need for digital, and girls have very little access to technology. Even if the family has one phone, as I said, they will prioritize it for the boy. So can we make devices available? Can we have talk times? Can girls get talk times on their phones, sponsored by CSR programs, so that they could actually go ahead and, take advantage of distance learning lessons? So these are some of the things I want to just leave you with, because these are important things. If we want to see 50% of the population of our country come up, and we have 243 million adolescents, out of which 120 million are girls, then all of us will have to rally around this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sohini ji, for that. I'm sure that was a learning for many of us here on the gender issue. Because frankly, I have never worked on the gender issue as such. I have worked on and off, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues in CSR also have worked on and off on gender. But thank you very much for that. We have, with that, we come to the end of the show. for today. We have time for one or two questions. If we have questions, please, this is the time. You can ask questions to each other also. Questions, anyone? Anjani ji?
Sir, just I want to ask the question that, no, not question, it is just my submission is that everyone present here, and they should consider this for the inclusion. And just as we know that Sweden and the Europe, Sweden has been made as the nodal country by the United Nations Organization to achieve the SDG goals. So what I think that in Indian perspective, all the corporations, big corporations, they should set the examples. By every corporation, they should have some kind of CSR constitutions, some set of rules and regulations. How they will go with the CSR programs. That should be defined in a very good manner in the constitutional way, so that's why there is a problem that the things are being implemented and suddenly it is break up. So in between journey of that, so I feel that the corporations and they are like the CASI global platform, we should have some kind of rules and regulations, and how there's kind of constitution that's any company can go through that. So that the policy making, like how the gender issues can be included in the policy making, how the things can be integrated into that plan. So we have not such things that the other European countries, they are developing very fast.
Just I have one point here, Dr. Anjani.
Yes.
So now what is happening is that this concept of one is climate.
Yes, sir.
Second is this concept of ESG.
Yes, sir.
It is taking a lot of importance even in funding.
Yes.
Funding of projects. Of course, in India, as of today, we have only $7 billion focused on ESG funding.
Correct, sir.
But if you go globally, it is a very large amount. So what is going to happen going forward? Already, I think one of them made in the presentation, they had shown IFC. Already, some of these multilateral institutions like World Bank, Asian Development Bank, IFC,
yes,
they started focusing on projects which have an element of ESG and this inclusion part also.
Correct.
And this amount of funds, $7 billion today, it is going to grow much faster, which means even funding for projects will be based on what is the commitment being made by a company towards ESG aspects.
Yes, great, sir.
Like we have this SDG, that 17 goals are there. So some of them will be linked to that, and based on that, they will arrive at a score and say that based on this score, the interest rate of the loan for you will be 14%, 15%, 16%.
Correct.
So those who are not meeting the ESG norms, the cost of funding is going to be higher.
Oh,
so that is coming that way. Then the second point is, SEBI already said the companies are making more than 5 crores and all that. And every month they come up with some new regulation where we are finding that more and more aspects are being included. So this inclusion aspect is also slowly getting integrated into the mainstream.
Correct, sir. Thank you.
And of course, it is a gradual process. Madam Shogini was saying that still a lot to be done for women and children. But this is happening now. That is what I wanted to say.
Perfect, sir. Perfect, sir. No, sir, that is fine. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
And just to add to that, if you're talking about SDGs, and I work on SDG 5, which is gender equality. If you look at it, if you do not reach gender equality, goal number 5, you will not be able to reach 11 out of the 17 SDG goals. And I'm sure the same will be with environment. So, maybe, one of the things that we could all talk about is that when we are building our CSR strategies, environmental and gender equality are things that are cross-cutting. And can we, kind of prioritize that? Because those are really the need of the hour, as far as I can see.
I completely agree. Let me put down a point of view before we end for the day. As a CEO coach, I coach a lot of board members, and I am an advisor to a lot of boards on CSR. So what I usually say is you pick up your theme. If you're a mining company, you pick up a village. If you are a fertilizer company, you pick up agriculture. So that is what I usually say. You pick up a theme, and within the parameters, you should have gender. So within whatever theme that you have, gender cannot be a theme. Yeah, so gender is a parameter within a theme usually, and that is how it works. So in 2010, yeah, 2010, one of the first interviews that I gave on CASI, we said the official statement of CASI was that sustainability should be interlinked and CSR should be intertwined within every department of business. Yeah, and that in 2021, the same sentence is on the headline of the World Business Council for Sustainable Business. Yeah, so yeah, that is the headline, and you can watch my YouTube video from 2010, which was when we started CASI. So gender is a parameter, and that is what I usually advise boards, that within whatever you do, just ask one question: के gender देखा क्या? So if the answer is yes, तो तुम्हारा काम हो जाएगा. You don't have to focus on that. You focus on your core area, which is connected to your business, so that the business head supports you. Otherwise, the CSR head will work like this, and the business head will work on that direction, and that is not very fruitful for the company. So they both have to work together. So you have to work necessarily on the theme. So the core theme will always be one of the top three, which depends on the kind of business that you are. As Abhilash ji said, on the ground or not on the ground. So
Yeah,
that
so
will define the
hope
theme.
to see gender equality becoming a headline, sir, in a few years, as you predict.
It will, see, gender equality will, my 2 cents is, it will never become a headline. What happens is, as you get educated, as India gets educated, gender equality will come automatically. So it is more a question of being educated. If you look at a simple thing like politeness, so if you look at teenagers who are educated, they are more polite when they talk to a girl or a woman. So that is, I think, it's a basic civic sense which education imbibes in you. Yeah, so
I
that
sincerely
is
hope
the
so.
core actually. It is, आप थोड़ा पढ़ लिख जाएंगे तो हो जाएगा, kind of thing. So it is more of education. If you are not educated, then you still are not there yet. So it is more of basic education, thoda civic sense, which will help you. But I'm sure we wish you all the luck, Sohini ji, in your endeavor. So thank you all very much for being here today. Sohini ji, thank you. Vikas ji, thank you. Kanan Saab, Anjani ji, Hayden, thank you very much, and a special thanks to Avilash ji for sparing his time.
Yeah,
Avilash ji, thank you very much for being here with us today, and I look forward to seeing you all at the